Picking wrong among DeepSeek V4 Pro, Claude Sonnet 5, Gemini 3.6. Flash costs you more than you think. This breakdown runs all three through the tests that actually decide which one fits your job. Let's start with the number everyone actually searches for. On official list pricing, DeepSeek V4 Pro charges 43.5 cents per million input tokens and 87 cents per million output tokens. Claude Sonnet 5, at its current intro pricing, charges $2 in and $10 out. Gemini 3.6, Flash, sits in the middle at $1.50 in and $7.50 out. Do the math, and DeepSeek is 11.5 times cheaper than Claude Sonnet 5 on output, and 8.6 times cheaper than Gemini 3.6 Flash. That's not a rounding difference. That's the gap between a hobby project and a real line item on your budget. Cash hit input pricing on DeepSeek drops to 0.0036 per million tokens, which is close enough to free that it barely deserves its own line item. Here's what that looks like at real volume. Run 10 million output tokens a month, a realistic load for a coding agent that's actually working, and DeepSeek V4 Pro costs you about $8.70. The same workload on Claude Sonnet 5 costs $100. DeepSeek V4 Pro takes this test clean, official numbers, no asterisks. That's not a small business decision anymore. That's the difference between running 5 agents and running 1. I spend most of my week digging through pricing pages, model cards, and independent benchmark trackers to figure out where these tools actually differ. And this comparison has more gap between what's advertised and what's real than almost any I've run this year. Price doesn't matter if the model can't actually write working code, so this is the test that decides whether DeepSeek's discount comes with a catch. On Terminal Bench 2.1, the agentic coding suite, DeepSeek V4 Pro scores 87.9, ahead of Claude Sonnet 5's 80.4 and Gemini 3.6 Flash's 78.0. That's a 7.5-point lead over Claude, official GA figures for DeepSeek. Vendor reported for Claude Sonnet 5, community reported for Gemini. That's the surprise from the top of this video. The cheapest model in the comparison isn't the weakest coder. It's the strongest one on the most commonly cited coding benchmark right now. It's not a clean sweep though. On SWE Bench Pro, a harder, real-world coding test, Claude Sonnet 5 leads at 63.2%, with Gemini 3.6 Flash at 58.7%, and DeepSeek are trailing at 55.4%. I want to flag that DeepSeek's figure here is from its preview era, so treat this one as directional, not apples to apples. One of the biggest problems I run into when using AI agents is turning their output into YouTube content I can actually use to market my product. That's why this video is sponsored by Subscriber, a tool that helps business owners connect their AI agents to YouTube and market their products without spending 10 hours every week creating content. You can connect Claude or ChatGPT directly to Subscriber. It then analyzes your business, website, and YouTube channel to help you create SEO-optimized video ideas, scripts, thumbnails, and even complete videos that actually match your brand. What I like most is that every week, Subscriber gives me a list of high-potential video ideas I can immediately execute, and it can even help edit videos for me, with or without my face, including videos like the one you're watching right now. It's easy to get started, and you can try Subscriber for free using the link in the description below. Now back to the video. And on OS World Verified, Gemini 3.6 Flash actually takes the top spot at 83.0, with Claude close behind at 81.2. DeepSeek doesn't have a published figure for this one, so we can't score it here. DeepSeek still wins the overall test on the strength of that terminal bench lead, but Claude Sonnet 5 is clearly the one to reach for on harder, real-world software engineering tasks specifically. A model that codes well but makes you wait breaks the feel of using it in a real agent loop, and this is where the standings flip completely. On output throughput, measured by artificial analysis on the same harness, Gemini 3.6 Flash puts out 232.4 tokens per second. DeepSeek V4 Pro runs at 89.7 and Claude Sonnet 5 trails at 71.9. That means Gemini is 2.6 times faster than DeepSeek and over 3 times faster than Claude. If you're generating long output constantly, that gap adds up to real time, saved across a workday. Time to first token flips the story again. DeepSeek V4 Pro answers in about 1.82 seconds, the fastest start of the three. Gemini 3.6 Flash takes around 11.5 seconds to get going, and Claude Sonnet 5 is the slowest by far at 22 seconds before it says a word. I'll call this one directional since the setups aren't identical across sources, but the gap is wide enough that it's worth noting regardless. Gemini 3.6 Flash takes the overall speed test on raw throughput, since that's what matters most once an agent is running continuously. Stick with me because the last 4 tests are where this decision actually flips. All 3 of these models advertise a 1 million token context window, so on paper, there's nothing to separate them there. The real gap shows up in max output per response. DeepSeek V4 Pro can generate up to 384,000 tokens in a single request. Claude Sonnet 5 caps out at 128,000, and Gemini 3.6 Flash caps at just 64,000. That means DeepSeek's ceiling is 3 times Claude's and 6 times Gemini's. For most everyday coding tasks, none of these limits matter. You'll never come close to hitting any of them. DeepSeek V4 Pro wins this test clean on official numbers from both companies. Call that one a tie. But if you're doing a full repo refactor or generating a long document in one shot, that's exactly the scenario where a hard output cap forces you to stitch together partial responses and reprompt. The best model on paper doesn't matter if it can't take the input you actually have, or if you can't get your hands on it the way your workflow needs. DeepSeek V4 Pro is text only, no image, no video, no audio input. Claude Sonnet 5 accepts text, image, and file input. Gemini 3.6 Flash accepts text, image, video, and audio, the widest range of the 3 by a clear margin. If your workflow involves screenshots, video walkthroughs, or voice notes, Gemini is the only one of the 3 that handles all of it natively. DeepSeek does win something meaningful here, though. It's the only model of the 3 shipping open weights under an MIT license, which means you can self-host it and run it entirely on your own infrastructure, if that matters to your team. Claude and Gemini are both closed, API only. On deployment access, DeepSeek's Pro endpoint supports 500 concurrent requests, while Gemini's Flash endpoint supports 2,500, a meaningfully higher ceiling if you're running high-volume production traffic. Claude Sonnet 5 spreads across Anthropic's own API, AWS Bedrock, Google Vertex, and Snowflake Cortex, giving it the broadest enterprise deployment footprint of the 3. So Gemini 3.6 Flash takes deployment and modality, and the scoreboard shifts its way. Here is where DeepSeek V4 Pro clearly pulls ahead of the field. Now, here is where Claude Sonnet 5 clearly pulls ahead of the field. Here is where Gemini 3.6 Flash clearly pulls ahead of the field. Pick the one whose single biggest strength matches the job in front of you today. One thing the docs never spell out will quietly cost you if you miss it. If this helped, the next breakdown on the channel goes even deeper.